First of all, thank you, Josh and Mark, for helping arrange this. I really appreciate the opportunity to come out and speak to you all. Before I start with today's topics, a couple of housekeeping issues. I do have a website called boquetehomes.com. On there right now are a series of frequently asked questions. These are the most frequently asked questions that I've had over the years, and tried to put in answers that are long enough that they answer the question but short enough so you don't get bored. I will be loading up, I'm working with my webmaster to get the presentations put onto the website so you can go there, and it won't have video, but it'll have basically the overview of the cost or the talks. The other thing I want to just briefly touch on is this time of the year. Christmas time in Boquete and in Panama is just phenomenal. If you've never been here over Christmas, the Panamanians and the local culture really celebrates Christmas as we celebrated Christmas many years ago. There's no problem putting up creches and nativity scenes, and up at the highway you see there's a new one up there, and all downtown is lit up, and Panama City's all lit up, and it's just really, really a special time to be here in Panama and to celebrate that with the local folks here. For us, this is also the beginning of our summer, and as I tell people, and my wife, we were talking about it yesterday. Yesterday was Mother's Day, which is also a Roman Catholic holiday. It's a holy day, the Ascension of Mary, Mother Christ. And it's really like our Memorial Day back in the States. It's sort of the beginning of the summer season. So as you notice, the weather has changed almost overnight. The air has gotten dry, the skies are really blue. And it's this period of time from December through January before we really get into the winds. That's really the most special time to be here. A lot of people leave, go back to the States, the foreigners, to celebrate Thanksgiving and Christmas, and really they're missing the best time of the year to be here. It's just a wonderful time, and celebrate that when you're here, and say Merry Christmas, and do all the things that we do to celebrate this special time of the year. Today I'm going to talk about something that I talk about frequently with folks, and it's what I call the 5 most common myths about living in Panama. And these are myths that you may read on other websites and real estate promoters and things that give somewhat of a distorted view of what it's really like to live in Panama. At the end of the speech, I'll also talk to you about the good things of living here and why we're all here. The first myth is what I call, if I can read it, in quotations, it's against the law in Panama. Okay, oftentimes you'll hear people saying, well, that's against the law. This is a very, very important concept for all of you to grasp. The legal system here is far different than it is in the United States, Canada, and Great Britain. In the United States, we have a law system that's based upon what's known as British or English common law. We don't use the common law down here. We use civil law. It's more like Napoleonic code. For example, you're not innocent until proven guilty. You're guilty until proven innocent. The jury trials are not common. The way evidence is accepted in the court of law is much different than the way that evidence is accepted in the United States. And there's no black and white as far as law is concerned. If you go to an attorney and you ask them about a specific legal question, oftentimes the answer will be very vague because there is gray areas. The laws are written here purposely to be gray. There's no sense of equal protection under the law. Okay, it's a common misnomer. It's not here. Okay, some people are treated differently than others. That's the way it is. It's a country of 3.5 million people. If you get into a local battle and it has to go into the court system, chances are one side or the other is going to have a connection to somebody involved in that legal process, which makes it very, very difficult to have an objective trial, an objective judicial outcome. So the key is really doing your homework. The key is not to get into a judicial process. The key is to prevent that before it even starts, okay? And as we do these talks, one of my fondest wishes is that I recognize that myself and everybody in here is going to make mistakes, okay? We're moving into a new country, we're moving into a new culture, we're dealing in an area where we don't truly know the language, most of us, okay? So there's going to be problems. What I'm going to try to do is to help make those problems small and not big, okay? If we can learn from our mistakes, as long as those mistakes aren't going to break you, you're in good shape. So if you can limit your mistakes to the small things that are manageable, you're going to be way ahead of the game. We're all going to make the mistakes, but we should survive. So remember, the law is different down here, and the key is really to get your homework done. If you're going to get involved in anything that has to do with the legal system, to get your homework done before it has to go to a legal situation. The other thing is that ultimately you may have to give up on certain battles and just say, okay, I made a mistake, it's going to cost me money, I'm going to settle it and move on, rather than to drag it out into court situations. I have many friends here over the years that have got into legal situations that have taken them 10 years or more to resolve it, and it didn't come out in their favor. So they were frustrated 10 years ago, now they're even more frustrated today. So again, find an attorney that you can communicate with, which is very important. People ask me, what do you look for in an attorney? Number one that you can communicate with. Does he or she answer your emails? Do they answer your telephone calls? And more importantly, remember, here most attorneys are what we would term a paralegal. Okay, they're trained to do the basics of passing information along to governmental agencies, filling out forms, etc. More than anything, when you hire an attorney, you want to hire an attorney who can get things done. Whether that's getting your visa, whether that's processing a purchase on a home, whether that's helping you get a bank account, whether that's walking you through the driver's license process, you want to find somebody who has contacts within the government and who can get things done. And that may mean you have to change attorneys. Don't worry about it. You know, I've gone through 10, 12 attorneys during my time here. Good friends with all of them, right? And some of them are better in some things than others. But that's what you learn. Move on to the next source. Do not allow your process to take a long time. Okay, get things done. I think living in Panama and Boquete particularly, that should always be your goal. At the end of the day, know specifically where you want to go and then be moving toward that every day. So any questions about the legal system? Well, I can answer those afterwards here. The second myth is that labor costs are low in Panama. Okay? People believe that labor is cheap. There's two components to the cost of labor. One is the actual dollar amount. Okay? Minimum wage is low. For construction, I was mentioning to a couple folks here, $2.52 an hour. For agricultural work, it can be less than $1 an hour. Okay? But there are other issues, or less than $2 an hour. But there are other issues involved with labor. For example, payroll burden. If you've ever had a business in the United States or anywhere else, you know that you have to pay payroll taxes, severance, and all of those issues. Payroll burden in Panama is 52% of the labor cost. Okay? So if you're paying somebody $1 an hour, 52 cents you'll have to pay above that to cover their Social Security and all of their benefits. Okay? Also, holidays. There's 22 paid holidays in Panama. And the government has this kind of crazy concept of creating holidays out of thin air. Okay? If the holiday's on Tuesday, we're going to create one on Monday, right? So you have additional holidays that are mandated by the government. You have 28 days of sick leave, okay? 28 days of sick leave. After 1 year, 28 days of sick leave, and you'll find that your employees will take the 28 days every year. They don't roll over, they expire at the end of the year, so during the course of the year, those 28 days will be used. After 1 year, everybody gets 30 days paid vacation. Okay, 30 days paid vacation. So now you got 22 holidays, 28 sick days, 30 days paid vacation. Then we have this wonderful concept known as the 13th month. 13th month is a magical month that was created, it's on nobody's calendar, but yet you have to pay your employees for a month that they don't work. And they break that up into 3 separate payments across the year, and that's something that you have to pay that adds to your payroll burden. So those are your costs. As an aside, you'll always know when the 13th month is being paid because you'll go into the stores and they're stocking up with stuff, okay? So generally speaking, I think when is it, Lizzie? It's April, August, and December, okay, are the 3 months where you get it. And right before, it's usually the second payday, so like on the 10th, the stores just get packed with stuff because people are going to get this flash of money. So if you go down early, you can get stuff that you didn't think was ever was going to be here. So that's the one side, the cost of labor. The other side is the productivity. okay? I was mentioning I did a major remodel down in Boquete Canyon Village in the clubhouse, and I hired electricians to go in and do a lot of electrical work inside here. Now, my dad was a journeyman union electrician. When he retired, he was making $70 an hour. I would have gladly paid $70 an hour, gladly, okay? Because he and his crew would have came in and they would have knocked out the entire job in probably less than 10 days, okay? 6 months. 6 months to get the work done. Now, that doesn't mean that they were there for 6 months, no. They would show up and then not show up and show up and not show up. So even though the cost was relatively low, the real cost over time was very expensive. So when you look at labor in Panama, labor is not cheap. It's actually very expensive because what you get for what you pay for is not as productive as what you paid for, what you're used to paying for in other countries, okay? And that leads to another subject, which I was talking about earlier too, about as Americans, Canadians, Europeans, we have this concept that you can fix problems by throwing money at it. You can't do that here. In fact, you have this perverse arrangement where if you throw more money at a problem, the problem gets worse because what you're really doing is training people that if they create a problem, they're going to get paid more, okay? So you have to be very careful about paying more money to get things done because you'll wind up not getting things done even though you pay more money for it, okay? So you have to be a negotiator, okay? The next subject, it's cheap to live in Panama. Okay, you'll hear that mentioned all the time. Panama cost of living is very cheap. I would say it used to be. Well, it used to be a lot cheaper than it is now. But there are a couple of factors that play into this. Number one, our previous administration, the Martinelli administration, they got a lot done. Okay, it was a very corrupt government. What's new? But they also instituted, I think, in a 5-year period, 4 minimum wage increases. Now, minimum wage in the United States, if you increase the minimum wage, it's only going to affect a very small percentage of workers because not very many workers in the United States actually get paid minimum wage. Here in Panama, probably 70–80% of the people who work get paid minimum wage. So when you increase the minimum wage, prices go up immediately. The last minimum wage increase was decreed in the last week of December in 2013 and took effect December 1st, 2014. It was a 12% increase in wages with the residual effect of the 52% on top of that. So when you look at it, the real cost was somewhere in the neighborhood of about 19% cost increase in terms of your wages. I remember going down to PriceSmart on the 2nd of January and everything in the store had gone up by about 15%. Across the board, okay? Because they realize that their labor inputs are going to go up immediately. And when your labor inputs are going up and because the systems here are not very efficient, you know, they're very much dependent upon labor, that when you have these labor increases, your costs go up directly. The United States Federal Reserve is exporting inflation around the world, particularly the countries, obviously, that use the US dollar. We see that down here. We see real inflation occurring. It's occurring at about a 6 to 7% clip. So things are becoming more and more expensive here. You can save money, obviously, by adapting your lifestyle. One of the things I think that makes our lifestyles cheaper here is that we consume less. I had this discussion the last time I was here, but in the United States and in many Western countries, the message that people get is to consume. Constantly, we're being bombarded with these messages to consume, to go to the malls, to spend stuff. Well, frankly, here it's kind of hard to buy stuff. You know, it's hard to bring stuff back. You know, so you really start reducing your consumption, and that reduces your overall cost of living. Obviously, the way you eat, if you eat fresh produce, if you eat fresh fish, if you eat locally produced stuff, it's very expensive. If you buy stuff in bottles, cans, or boxes, it's typically going to be more expensive. Real estate properties prices, which is my business, have frankly gotten out of control. Prices along this highway now are $50, $60 a meter, $70 a meter. Somebody asked me, it's the gringos that are raising these prices. Are the gringos raising the prices? No. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's Panamanians that are paying this kind of money. It's not the gringos. Gringos actually now are having far less economic impact than you think you are. Okay, there's not enough of us, and frankly, over the years, the average Panamanian has gotten richer, the average gringo has gotten poorer. That's just the way it is. That's reflected in the cost of land. I've been spending the last 2 months looking for property. Anywhere in Bajo Boquete, it's just incredibly expensive. There's property in downtown selling for $400 a meter. $100 at $100 a meter to give it to something that you may be able to wrap your mind around. At $100 a meter for property, that's $500,000 or $400,000 an acre. $400,000 for an acre of property, which is crazy, absolutely crazy. But that's a phenomenon that's specifically here. Right now, I'm looking at property in Puerto Rios, looking at property closer to Caldera, where the prices are reasonable. You get a lot of value for your money. You may have to drive another 20 minutes, but if that's going to save you several $100,000, get you a lot more land, get you more to do, that might be the way to go. Okay, that's what we're looking at, rather than looking at Boquete. There are some situations, if you really look hard, that are available, but in general, it's getting more expensive to live here. You have to manage that. You have to buy smart. You have to reduce your consumption, because at the end of the day, we live in a beautiful place, and these are some of the trade-offs that we have. Myth number 4, English is widely spoken in Panama. Okay, I don't know how many times I've read that on internet sites, websites. English is widely spoken in Panama. There are some places in the city, in hotels, some restaurants, where you'll find regularity, you'll find somebody that speaks English. Once you get into the interior, anywhere in the countryside, it's highly unlikely. Okay, it's highly unlikely that you're going to interact on a daily basis with somebody who speaks English. There's 2 ways to work around that. Okay, one is to try to increase your Spanish-speaking skills. And I think over time you're going to learn enough to be functional in Panama, which means you'll be able to buy things, you'll be able to communicate with workers, etc. But for most of us, we're not going to get to the level where we're going to be conversationally fluent. Okay, unless you really make an effort to do that. The other workaround or life hack is to find a fixer. Okay, is to find somebody that speaks both English and Spanish. Is typically a Boqueteña or Boqueteño, who can go in and help intercede on your behalf. And this is critical for critical issues. For example, legal. Okay, you're going to want to make sure you truly understand what's in any document that's being written. Okay, and one of the things that you'll find is the biggest problems occur not because you've been given misinformation, but because you didn't ask the right questions. Okay, you didn't ask specifically, and your attorney or your advisor did not give you the answer to a question that you never asked. Okay, so you have to understand and be very clear in terms of where you're going and where you want to be at the end of the process. Okay, there are people out there, there are services out there that will help you with that. If you're going to go into a doctor's office and the doctor does not speak fluent English, I mean, I can't think of anything more important than to be able to communicate symptoms, because a doctor can't, he's just guessing. If you cannot communicate your symptoms to he or she, there's no way that they can go ahead and diagnose you, not properly. So finding somebody who speaks fluent English and Spanish that can go down there and help that, and you may have to pay them a few bucks to do that, obviously, it's money well spent. Money well spent. Find somebody who speaks English, take that person under your wing, pay them appropriately to do that on critical tasks. The final myth is that mañana means tomorrow. Okay. The literal translation is mañana does mean tomorrow, but culturally, mañana doesn't necessarily mean tomorrow. What I have found in the past, and your mileage may vary, but what I found in the past, culturally here, Panamanians are incredibly gracious, incredibly helpful people, and they don't want to say no. Okay, so they'll say yes because they think they'd rather not tell you no because they would disappoint you. The problem is that as Americans particularly, the most important thing that we have is time. And so if somebody says, I'll be there tomorrow at 10, you're going to change your schedule and you're going to be there at 10 waiting for that person to show up who may or may not come, okay? And it's not because they're picking on you, okay? They don't do this just to gringos. It just happens. And one of the problems that we have here is that you'll find a good tradesman, you'll find a good plumber, you'll find a good electrician, you'll find a good car mechanic, and they have the inability to scale, okay? We all only have 24 hours in our life, okay? We only can do, if we're a worker, there's only so much work that we can do. Now, in most countries, if I was a very successful businessman and doing what I do, and I had more business than I could handle, what would I do? I'd hire somebody, right? And I would train that person, and that person then would be me, and then I could do twice as much, and then hire another person. I could do 3 times as much, and effectively get the work done. But what happens is that they come up with the same issues that we come up with. They hire somebody, the guy does a crappy job, I get a call from my customer, and I say, screw it, I'll just do it myself, right? He gets frustrated with his worker, and he moves on, and so he or she is stuck with only the work that they can do. This happens with attorneys, happens with doctors, happens with carpenters, happens with plumbers, happens with electricians, happens everywhere. So as consumers, we have to be constantly watching, and the guy that was good before may not be good the next time, okay? And then you have to go find somebody else. So it's always good to have a couple of backups when you're out there. I find this all the time. My problem is that I'll have group discussions like this, and afterwards somebody will come up and say, I have this plumbing problem. Is there somebody you can recommend? So I say, sure, here's Jose. Jose's done a really good job for me. So 3 days later, I'll get a call. This Jose, I can't believe it. Guy never showed up. He did a crappy job. Why would you recommend him? Well, when he worked for me, he did a great job, right? But your experience is different, okay? And that's the way it's going to be. I'm reluctant now to recommend anybody, and when I do, I basically say, I can't guarantee that this person is going to do what you think he's going to do, he or she, and so you have to judge that on yourself. It could very well happen, but it might not happen that way. So just constantly go out and look for people and form relationships. That's the other thing. It's very, very important to form relationships with the people that work for you or you work with. Okay, that's more important than the money in many cases, is forming a relationship, giving these people a break, not trying to be too pushy, but being forceful, okay, not getting angry. If you get angry, done. It's done, okay? If you yell at somebody here, it's done. They will not work for you, okay? So what you have to do is you have to approach everything diplomatically, which runs counter to a lot of the ways that we do business around here. But over time, you'll either adapt or die, right? You'll either figure it out or you won't, okay? So those are big myths. Legal, which is very, very important. Understand we're in a different legal system, okay? English is not widely spoken here, so make accommodations to do that. Labor costs can be high because it's not productive, okay? Mañana doesn't mean mañana, okay? And the cost of living can be a little bit more expensive than you anticipated, but those are manageable costs that you can manage. Finally, as I wrap this up, despite all of this, okay, despite the difficulties, and if it was easy, and I've learned in my business life, if things were easy, everybody would be doing it, right? It's not easy. But once you get over the learning curve, once you understand culturally how to assimilate, once you let it go, just let it go, okay, it's a wonderful place to live. Okay, we have incredible weather, we're surrounded by beauty, we're surrounded by, in general, I think Panamanians are some of the nicest people I've ever met. Really, really nice people. They're warm and hospitable and friendly. It's a great place to live. And frankly, I would not choose to live anywhere else. This is why I live here. And I think once everybody gets over that curve, limits the amount of interaction you have with the government like anywhere else, that you wind up living a very wonderful and fruitful life. The thing that I would mention to this group, and I always mention it, is that you've got a network of people that are coming. You have a network of people here. Use that network. Use each other. Lean on each other. Use yourselves for your social interaction, etc. Learn what your friends and colleagues' skills are, and use those skills to the best of your advantage, and you'll be way ahead of everybody else that comes down here. Okay? What is considered a full-time employee? Well, there are a bunch of different criteria that fit there. Right? It's not carved in stone, but one of the things that they look at, the Department of Labor, and the Department of Labor here is very much skewed toward the employee. Very much skewed toward the employee. Let's take, what are the two most common employees that you would have that may or may not be your employees? Gardeners and housekeepers. They're not your employee. They're a contractor. Okay? And as such, you pay them their wages, and they're responsible for reporting their wages. If you are their primary source of income, typically if you're hiring them for 4 or 5 days, they're going to be your employee. You've got to do Social Security, you've got to do the severance pay, you've got to do the holidays, etc. Okay? But most of us, unless you have a full-time live-in or worker that's coming in every day, you're not going to be faced with that issue. Okay? If you have any questions, talk to your attorneys. But even there, they're going to be somewhat gray area about it. But typically, what you want to make sure is, are you making money elsewhere? Are you working for somebody else? And if you can show that they're working for 2 or 3 other people, then no, they're not your employee, they're a contractor.
And just to go along with that, so like we have a part-time nanny, and we take the children to her 3 days a week for like 6 hours. But I don't know what else she's doing as far as income. Does that make us responsible for her?
I would ask.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have a contract with her?
No.
Okay. You might want to consider contract that specifically says that she is a contract employee, that she gets work outside of what you do, that you define your work as this many hours, this many days of the week, so that you solidify that relationship. But most of us, I mean, when you find a good worker, they're like gold. Okay. And so you don't want to screw that relationship up. You want to make sure that they're taken care of. They're going to come and ask you for money. Well, that's the other thing. If you have a worker that asks you for borrow money, borrow means give it to them. Okay? Don't ever have any expectations of being paid back. Now, they won't ask you to give them money. They'll say, I'll borrow the money, but you give it to them. And more often than not, I give it to them. Right? I give it to them. Because what you want are some people that have loyalty. You want people that are looking out after your best interests, and that can be priceless. That really can be priceless. But if you want to make sure, everything works until it doesn't, right? And if you get into a dispute with somebody, you want to make sure that you're covered, at least to the extent that you can be. Liquidation can be very expensive here, meaning paying off an employee, particularly if you terminate them. And if they've been there for many years, it's going to cost you a lot of money, relatively speaking, right? And be flexible with them as well. Works out.
Hey, Paul. Chris from North Carolina. Background in real estate. Pleasure to meet you. My question has to do with the having someone as an interpreter that goes between English and Spanish. What would you consider a fair price or wage or compensation for them providing those services? Thanks.
Okay. Depends on what they do. Okay. Are you that person? Well, it depends on what they do. And it depends on what you want them to do. Okay. If you're looking for somebody just to go down and spend some time at a attorney's office or his doctor's office, depends on how many hours. I would figure a minimum $25. Okay, to have them spend a day or half a day with you. And there's a difference between somebody who is going to act as an interpreter and somebody who does certified translation. Big difference. Certified translation, where you're getting a legal document certified in English as a certified copy of what was actually written, I think runs about, let's say 25 cents a word, something like that. It's not cheap, about 25 cents a word. I think the last document that I had translated was a contract. It cost me like 150 bucks, something like that. It wasn't cheap. Okay, but that's legal paper? Yeah, it was a several page document. Okay, because legal translation can be different than, you know, conversational translation, because every word in a legal contract is important, okay? And versus or you know, so it's important that that document is certifiably and acceptable in a court of law, and so they have to be a certified translator. And then I always have if I'm doing any development, for example, years past I would do actual physical development of properties. I would get laws interpreted. I'd get them translated. You go on to Elance or a variety of online interpretation sites or sites, labor sites, and find somebody who speaks Spanish, and you bid your job out, right? And I don't want a certified translation. I just want to know what the gist of the law is. So let's say there's a new law, Law 8. I want to know what it says. You know, I'll pay $150 to get it done, and then I can read the law. And then with that, I can go to my attorney and say, you know, what ramifications is going to have. And this is really important to understand as far as the legal system is concerned. In the past, when I was doing work, like development work, and I'd want to know whether or not the law allowed me to do something or not, I'd go to one attorney, I'd sit down and say, okay, according to this law, am I allowed to do what it is that I want to do? And the attorney would look at the law and look at what I wanted to do, and he'd say, you know what, Paul, based upon what you're doing, I don't see anything in the law that specifically prohibits you from doing what you want to do. Great. Okay, so then I'd say, you know, just to be sure, I'm going to take it to another attorney. I'd say, well, you know, can I do what I want to do based on this law? And they'd go, you know what, Paul, I don't see anything in this law that allows you to do what you want to do. Okay, and that's very important, right? Because the law is written in such a fashion it doesn't allow you to do it, but it doesn't prohibit you from doing it. What does that mean? Well, that means you do it, right? Or you find out what the consequences are for not doing it, okay? You know, which brings me to my next point. And here in Panama, if you get into a legal dispute with somebody, it's very difficult to get the law to make them do something, okay? Now think about that. You can be in the right, but to make them do something, it's very difficult. To prevent them from doing something is a little easier. But once they've done it, to make them do something else is very, very difficult. Okay, so that's why, again, you want to make sure that you do your homework and you get into a point with any agreement that you have that you're not going to get to that point. Okay. So yeah, I mean, that's something you need to negotiate. There's a couple of women around town who do that kind of thing. You know, if you're, part of the deal is if you're going to David, what is that? 2 hours just in transportation, right? You're going back and forth. You're going to be eating up their time. And how important is it to you, right? You know, that's what I would say. And how often are you going to use them? If you're using somebody once a year, it's probably going to cost you more than if you use them every week, right? So it just depends. And you speak Spanish? Oh, no, the gentleman behind you. A huge advantage. Huge advantage. Okay, and again, I would make that, you know, again, those are resources within the group. Use those resources within the group. But there's two things that are important about the person that you would hire to help you along. One is their ability to speak the language. The other is their connections, right? My assistant, the woman I use, she's been living up here forever. She can walk into the mayor's office. She can talk to the town treasurer. She knows all the people down to Veed. So she can open up doors in addition to answering questions. How much is that worth to you, right? So you know, that's like with your attorney. Your attorney, you need to know their Rolodex, right? Who do they know? And remember, government changes every 5 years. So the guy who's in deep with the government this time around may know nobody, or may be on the B list with the next government going around. So, you know, you just have to be aware of those types of things. Any other questions? Good. All right. Again, Boquete Homes, you can go there. It's not a sales site. It's just a place where I put information, you know, and it's what I do.